welcome to Wellness Live. My name is Dr. Olivia Moses, and I'm your host for this series brought to you by the Living Whole Wellness Program here at Loma University Health. Well, today we have a very important topic for you, and you might let me put it this way. Everyone's been in a crisis, whether it is a personal crisis, whether it is a crisis in your community or in your country. I think we've all probably gone through a crisis situation. And today we have a wonderful guest that we're very excited to have here and very blessed to have her here. Her name is Dr. Beverly Buckles, and she is the Dean of the School of Behavioral Health here at Loma University. And she actually founded the International Behavioral Health Trauma Team that she founded in 1995. They are a group of really great professionals going around internationally to different areas of the globe to actually do crisis intervention and management. So that's what we're going to talk to you today. Where she has traveled, the International Trauma Team has traveled is many places around the globe. They went to the Indian Ocean tsunami event. They have gone to Katrina. They serve our region. In addition, they're part of the first responders team here at Loma University Health. So she's the perfect person to talk about managing through a crisis. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Beverly Buckles.
Thank you, Olivia. Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and because this is a short presentation, I'm going to get started on some things that we're going to talk about today. So first of all, we're going to talk about some of the aspects of a crisis, the different things that impact people in various ways, some interventions that can be used to support individuals both pre and post a crisis event, and also then talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that individuals have if they have or they know of someone who has experienced a traumatic event. So let's start by just thinking a little bit about what a crisis event really is. We think of them as critical incidences, and these can be a whole variety of types of things, but in particular, they are usually man-made, natural, they can be accidental. We typically think those things which are sudden, dramatic, that they go outside our normal coping and our normal experiences of daily life. They are overwhelming, they're powerful, and people, when they talk about these experiences, regardless of who they are, professionals or not, they talk about their reactions to these experiences as very distressing, painful. And these are the kinds of experiences that are disruptive to everyone. And as Olivia said, we've all had things happen, and none of us are really immune to the kinds of reactions that we have. But we're going to talk about ways that we can support ourselves now and in the future. This slide talks about, or just gives you kind of a picture of the whole type of variety of things that can take place that we think of as happening across a lifespan that could be considered traumatic events. And they vary by individuals, and they vary by time of life and types of experiences. I want to also now go to some of the things that we think about in terms of different types of crisis events. Crisis events have different characteristics that can impact how we deal with them and how individuals around us can deal with them. I think it's important to understand when we are responding, whether it's something that's happened to us or someone that we're dealing with as a professional, to understand what took place and why that could have a deeper or more significant impact is an important part of looking at crisis experiences. So warning or no warning, or the shorter the period of warning, then there is likely more of a surprise or fright experience that takes place for the individual. Time of day. Night is harder. It's time when you can't see, you're more confused, where are things, where should I go? And that does have more impact on people. The fright response can be greater. The duration of the event. So the length of exposure to a particular event can add to the intensity. So the actual impact, the intensity of the event itself. So what has happened, how much destruction has taken place. Geographic location, the more isolated people are from resources, first responders, and others that could help them. So if people are in a remote location where there aren't those things available, it can have a greater impact in terms of the resolution of their crisis response. So also the nature of a crisis. You know, things that are natural, we tend to take those as things that nobody planned, nobody could do anything about. But greater impact takes place when things are man-made, they appear to have an intentionality to them, and they include violence. Those things are more difficult to deal with in the long run. So we also talk about then the post-crisis environment. So organizations have a lot to do with this. So organizations are prepared, and you hear a lot about that at Loma Linda. We're constantly being prepared and practicing for the event that could happen. So organizations that are prepared, there's less impact on the people in that environment. Knowing that there are available resources and making sure those are appropriately assigned when something takes place, that also can reduce the impact, or it can be greater if those things haven't been addressed. The ability to contain a crisis from having a continuing impact is also important. So in a post-crisis situation, if development issues have not been addressed in a pre-crisis state, the impact can be greater on those trying to get back to normal. So we also talk about the things that are factors from an individual and an organizational characteristic that also can have an impact on people coming back to normal or recovering from the crisis event. And this list is provided here on this slide. So individual traits could include things, or do include things such as age. So people who are very young, who don't know what's going on, don't understand the chaos that may be taking place, will have a greater impact. Individuals in other age groups, like very elderly, who may have limited capacity to move quickly and to respond to what may be going on, may also be at greater risk for longer-term impact. And then people do have natural different attitudes and perceptions of events, and that can also affect things. Knowing or having available a social support system is a very important factor in how people recover from crisis events. And then also we think about there are two sides to previous trauma experiences. Some individuals may have had previous trauma experiences that they had growth from those, and now they have greater coping skills than others. And those coping skills are useful to themselves and other people that may be going through a crisis. Or individuals may have had a crisis event that they did not resolve. And so now an additional crisis event becomes a cumulative effect, and the impact can be greater. And then going back to thinking about organizations and organizational traits, organizations that are prepared and have a crisis management perspective in place, it does better for the organization and the people that are part of that organization, whether they're employees or students or patients or whoever they serve. Those people will be better off as well. So that pre-crisis preparation is critical. We also talk, and this is just a brief way to talk about it, about communication. Open communication with the people who are part of the organization or served by the organization is important. Not keeping secrets from people when they need to know something. People will constantly want to know what the updates are, and giving them good, correct information in periodic and appropriate time frames is what we do to help people respond and to come back from a crisis. We don't really think the same way about media coverage because accurate information is important, but a spokesperson of the organization needs to be responsible. And typically you see organizations intentionally, not as a bad thing, but as really truly a good thing, trying to control the access of the media to their employees, their patients, others. Because one of the things that takes place is when you see these people having their emotive responses, it may or may not be accurate to what's really going on. They may be sharing inaccurate information. It may be actually rather threatening and intimidating to be asked to share information, and people have responses to being asked to talk about traumatic events that they may not be prepared for, and they may then have an additional traumatic response as a result of that. The other thing we talk about media is to shut it off. You need to know what's happening and to be alert and aware, but then you need to stop being a consumer of the repeat. We know that children, when they see repeated images of a crisis over and over again, they may believe that it's happening again and again and again. But even if we know it's not happening, what we know about the neurobiology of a trauma and a crisis effect on the body and the brain is that seeing something over and over and over again, or talking about it over and over and over again, has the impact of setting the trauma deeper, and it may not be as easily to resolve afterwards. So this is key. Perception is everything. People experience events differently. One of the things that does have a major impact, and is fairly uniform though, is if the event is perceived as life-threatening, then that will have more impact. But regardless, I want us to go away with the understanding that people perceive things differently, and we never judge. So you or I might see something and think, that's no big deal. Why is everybody so upset? But someone else may have had a previous experience or something that took place that was similar to that event, very frightening, life-threatening, and they're having a big reaction. They may not even understand why they're having a reaction, but we never judge. And I'll give you one quick example. I love animals. I love dogs especially. And I may see a dog coming down the street on a leash with what appears to be a very friendly adult. I'm not intimidated. In fact, I'm anticipating the opportunity to say hello and introduce myself and talk to the pet. Not the person, the pet. But someone else may see that dog coming on a leash with what appears to be a safe adult and be terrified. And they may or may not remember that they had a very traumatic experience at some point in their life as a result of an interaction with an animal. So when we talk about our responses to crisis, we need to remember that it's biology, it's not mental weakness. Many people after a crisis event think that they've been damaged or broken. Often we hear people say things like, am I crazy? Am I ever going to get well? And we need to remember that this is our biology interacting with something that has happened, but it isn't the same as a mental weakness or a mental health issue. And when mental health professionals work in the aftermath of a trauma or a crisis event, we oftentimes will reassure people by saying things like, your reaction to the event is normal or was normal. The event was not normal. So this slide provides 6 categories. It's not exhaustive, but these are categories of the different kinds of common reactions that individuals have after a crisis event. And again, we normalize by showing this to people. These can vary by individual. They don't have to be the same for the people even in the same family. They vary by human. And one of the other things that we've often said to people that helps to illustrate this is that some people laugh when other people cry, and both are normal after a crisis event. So what is the difference between normal versus pathological responses? Well, everyone is going to have a reaction, an acute reaction to a very traumatic event. And that usually can last for up to 30 days. And again, there's human variability into that. But gradually, those symptoms that one might experience, such as sleep disruption or lack of ability to concentrate or feeling numb or more emotional, those things start to dissipate over time. And within the first 30 days usually. However, if the symptoms do persist, they can result in more serious challenges and even result in unhealthy coping, which is why typically if someone starts to have or continues to have serious difficulties with the kinds of dysregulation that they're experiencing, and it continues beyond 60 days, it is truly advisable that they seek the help of a qualified professional. However, people experience things all the time, and if someone you know or you yourself have experienced a difficult situation, then seek help sooner than later and learn to understand what the normal reactions are that you're having and the processes of healing. That's always a healthy and advisable thing to do. So I want to come to some of the common workplace interventions, and we have a list of things here. It's not completely exhaustive, but it gives some idea of the different types of things. One of the most common ones that is used, and it's worldwide, and we hope it becomes even more embedded in various practices, is something called psychological first aid. It's a process of stabilizing individuals in a crisis, getting them back to normal as soon as possible. Healthcare professionals do it all the time, and it is very effective. The more we can provide psychological first aid, the less likely there will be continuing effects, negative effects on the individual. So getting back to normal quickly, stabilizing quickly. The next two, critical incident stress debriefing and critical incident management, are really for first responder and teams within crisis management within an organization. It's how they look back and how they think about the problem solving that took place without shame. Because these are big events and people do what they need to do in the moment and they have practiced them, but you still have a debriefing process. We also seek out and use community and organizational consultation. And many times people will seek counseling from someone in the community or a spiritual leader. I just want to advise you that we do know about the neurobiology of crisis response, so if you are seeking someone out after an event, it's really important that you seek a qualified professional who has expertise in trauma and resiliency-informed care. And then the last one in that first category, resiliency-informed support, is something I'm going to talk about more as we go on. But all of the interventions have some common elements to them. They are normalizing the experience. Our reactions are normal. The event is not normal. They help us to restructure how we think about things through cognitive behavioral therapy and other types of support. They give us an opportunity for grief support because there can be losses, great losses in crisis events. And they bring our attention to behavioral awareness and wellness support that can help us to move on from whatever has taken place. So a couple of things I'd like you to remember, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, which is brief. And as the first part is adversity is not destiny. Things happen to all of us, but that does not set the course of our life. We can and we are resilient. People are in fact amazingly resilient, and they can learn ways to support themselves and increase their resilience.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Buckles. This is really great information. So again, we're so excited you're here. But for those of you who are in our audience and you're watching us live, please go ahead and type in your questions now. We can ask Dr. Buckles while she's here. So we actually have a good one come through. And they state, how can one support others that have been through a crisis? And I would assume this person is as a layperson.
We're going to talk about that more in the second half, but being able to support them, I will go through some things in the second half which we try to move away from, but letting people talk if they need to talk, but don't force people to talk. We have typically said to people, you got to let them get the story out. Tell it again, tell it again, tell it again. The more you tell it and write about it, the better it will be. We know that isn't correct for everyone. If someone wants to tell the story, we help them to tell the story in a new way. So I will jump ahead and say we take them to the end of the story and help them to think about the fact that they did survive and who helped you the most in that moment and what is helping you the most now and what would help you the most now. So we bring them to more of a strength and a resiliency conclusion, rather than taking them back through everything.
Got it. Okay, so focusing on the end.
Focusing on the end.
So, Dr. Buckles, you mentioned a little bit about children. Mm-hmm. Is there something specific that we should monitor or watch for or address in children that is different to adults?
Well, given some of the world events that we've been to, the first thing we need to do is notice that children are part of what has happened. So there have been situations where the health and well-being of a child is not really the focus, but first of all, for anyone who's been through a crisis, including children, they may not complain about an injury, but they may actually have an injury. So have everyone checked out. Dust and debris can hide injuries. We don't want anyone to have something bigger happen to them because we didn't see that they needed something. So if someone's not playing the way they used to play, or they have a little bit of pain when they lift up, or they seem not as alert, it's time to absolutely get them checked out. In addition to that, adults or children watch adults, and they do grieve differently, but they watch us. So oftentimes, and I'm kind of channeling some of my colleagues whose specialty is children, that children are going to perhaps want to talk about it for a moment or play. It's usually play or draw or something, and then they're done and they're gone. And we try to be as honest and use language that supports children, but we don't make up stories that aren't true. We can tell children things that actually frighten them more, and so they become afraid to go to sleep. If we say, "Are your little friend, he just went to sleep," they may be afraid to go to sleep. So they're, depending on a person's spiritual background, they may say something like, from a Christian perspective, I'll just start with that Jesus has said he will always be with us. So he was with Johnny, and he's still with Johnny.
Great. Another question that we have here, it's a good one, but I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, is I have someone in my life who seems like they're overreacting. How do you address that? And is there such a thing as overreacting?
Well, first of all, we don't know why they're overreacting, and so I can't say that every case is going to be the same. We try not to judge. Some individuals will have experiences they don't even remember that is triggering something within them, and their nervous system is responding, and then they're emotionally responding to what they sense happening in their body. So we do try to get people, if something has just occurred, in a stable situation to reassure them that we're there for them, that we're giving them support. And again, we come back to what would help you the most in this situation. If somebody cannot calm down and it actually becomes disruptive to others, then it's probably time to bring in advanced healthcare professionals to assist them through a very difficult time. And that may or may not include medication.
Now, when you are an individual who might be going through a crisis, is there a way to self-monitor? What kind of questions should you be asking yourself during a situation like that to be proactive maybe about it?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the second half.
Well, why don't we get to it? Yeah,
okay.
Why don't we get to it?
Okay. So in this next section, we're going to talk, and again, I'm sorry it's brief, but we're going to talk about understanding the nervous system and the normal neurobiological response to crisis and extreme events. So what we know now is that one of the best ways to enhance our resiliency is to understand how our nervous system responds to extreme stress or crisis and how to reset our nervous system after something has taken place. There's a lot of neurobiology around this, and we're only going to hit on some of the highlights of it, but we think of this as the neurobiology of survival, and in a response, then we think of it as resiliency-informed support. So, very briefly, all humans have the same divine design of their nervous system. We have two parts to the autonomic nervous system. We have the sympathetic nervous system that revs us up in times of stress, and the parasympathetic nervous system that slows us down, much like a parachute that brings us back down to rest after a stressful situation. But during extreme stress, and this is what we can't get into in great detail here, but our brain is created in such a way that it engages in a survival assessment that results in revving up the sympathetic nervous system and switches on then an involuntary fight, flight, or freeze response. And I want to emphasize involuntary. You don't get to sit back and plan, what am I going to do? Which way should I go? Should I go this way? What am I going to do? You don't have that opportunity. You are divinely made to survive, and your brain is there to assess and then direct you. And it's an immediate response. Crises are immediate, unplanned responses. So thankfully, we are wired to immediately respond without having to have a committee or planning session. We wouldn't survive if we had to do that. So after that event, and after the brain responds as it does, then following the conclusion of that, then the parasympathetic nervous system returns us to a normal state. Now, there are situations, though, that it doesn't happen like that. And so we're going to talk about now the concept of a resilience zone, which is one of the ways we talk about how our nervous system functions. So you'll see here this resilience zone, and there is something we call the okay place or the best place for the resilience zone or your nervous system to function. And all of us have a resilience zone. We all have a place where our nervous system functions at its best place. It's one of those parts of the body most of us never think about, but it's vital to how we experience things. It's vital to being in our best place. So when we're in our resilience zone, or that okay place, then we're functioning in our best. Our brain, our frontal lobe is functioning, planning, we can problem solve, we have self-control. We wouldn't be as likely to have a reaction we wouldn't understand or be able to control. It just wouldn't be there because we're in that best place of our nervous system balance. But there are things that happen. Those are the traumatic events. The lightning bolt is the event. And as you can see, the disruption that occurs as a result of it, that is what happens in a crisis. And when that occurs, then people are bumped out of that best place. The sympathetic nervous system is kicking in. For some people, though, after the event, they don't return to normal in the same way. They stay stuck. They may stay stuck on high, which would mean they would be edgy, irritable, more prone to angry outbursts, possibly to panic or violence even, anxiety. Other people might be stuck on low, and in that case, it's kind of the slowing of their system where they would be depressed or sad, feeling exhausted or fatigued, or wanting to isolate, sensing numbness. So individuals can have either occur. Some people have both occur, even within one crisis event. All are normal, but getting stuck and not being able to come out of it is something that we do start to focus on. So when someone has been stuck in high or low, then we oftentimes start to see that their resilience zone is narrowed. So they aren't able to respond to even small stressors in the same way. They might react in a very extraordinary way. So for example, something small happens, but they blow up. So that may be an indicator, though, that they are stuck. Something has triggered them, and now they are stuck on high. Or they might get extremely sad and start to isolate again. They could be stuck in low. So what we want and what the goal is of learning skills to work with your nervous system is to be aware of your ability. So that self-ability to start to regulate your own nervous system, to bring yourself back into a place where your frontal lobe is functioning and being able to make good decisions is what we try to do. And the more we practice a set of skills, the more we can widen that resilience zone so that for the future, dealing with any kinds of stressors or bigger events that could take place, that we're better able to face those as they occur. So I'm going to talk a little bit about resiliency-informed support. Now, we have looked at all kinds of models. We continue to look at these, and we look at those that are evidence-supported. So I'm presenting to you one that we know from experience and a lot of research works, and this is the community resiliency model. It is a set of skills, 6 wellness skills, that help to reset the natural balance of the nervous system. Individuals can learn to understand how their sensations are connected to their own well-being, the sensations within their nervous system. And as one learns these skills, then one builds resiliency and moves towards more of a sense of wellness. Now, again, I don't have time to go through all of this with you, but I invite you to look at your apps, and this is a free app called iChill, available for Android and iPhones, and it talks you through everything, including all the skills. This evening, I'm only really going to hit on 3 of the 3 most critical skills and take you through them very quickly, so you may have questions about them that hopefully we can get to. So the first skill is called tracking. This is the most essential skill, and it's what most of us never learn to do, and I'm guilty of that too. Most of us learn to ignore sensations that we're experiencing or to focus on them. So focusing on distress or ignoring distress, neither one is a good choice. But as we learn to discern differences between sensations of distress versus well-being, then we have a choice that we can make, and we can pay attention to things that are occurring on the inside and move away from distress to something that supports us in a better way. So tracking, which is what we call it, or observing what's going on the inside, is noticing or paying attention to what's happening in your body at the present moment, and that could be any present moment. So it's determining if a sensation is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So the way I might do this is just sitting and staying with the sensation, and as I track and sense what's going on in my body, if I start to notice something that is unpleasant, then because I'm human and I have this incredible brain, I have the ability, we all do, to shift away from that unpleasant sensation to someplace else in the body that may be more comfortable or more pleasant, more neutral. So it could be the tip of the nose, it could be a baby finger, it doesn't really matter what part of the body, but noticing what is unpleasant and not staying with it, moving away from it. And we work with individuals who are experiencing a lot of different difficulties, and it surprises them that they have this ability within them to move away from. And even if it's for an instance, it can help. And then they learn that that mastery can grow as they continue to do it. And as you practice skills like this of well-being, then over time, or maybe even sooner than later, you can notice that, as I do that, maybe my breathing is deeper. Maybe my heart rate is starting to slow down. I'm not as anxious. I feel more relaxed or calm. As we track our nervous system, we will have nervous system releases. This is also very normal and very human, and it's a wonderful biological thing to be aware of. So after something has happened, when there is a nervous system release and something that we've done to support it, we may feel some tingling or warm or cool. There are lots of different things. We may yawn. Yawning is an amazing gift to us. Just another part of that divine design that helps to refresh those neural responses, increases oxygen intake, and helps us to just slow down an overactive reaction that we may be having. It's also contagious, so it works around people that we may be with. The next skill I'm going to mention, and again quickly, is something we call resourcing. Again, being human, we have these unique abilities. We also have unique experiences that are individualized. So each of us have things in our present or past that are considered external or internal resources, things that bring us joy, peace, calm, comfort. These are people, places, pets, faith, things that you are good at, playing the piano, music, art, something that you like about yourself. It could be the fact that you have a great sense of humor, or that everyone knows that you have an incredibly kind heart. Whatever it is, those are things unique to you. We never tell someone else what their resource is. So we would never tell someone, it's prayer, it's, whatever. We never tell them. It has to resonate with that person. It has to be their resource. So one of the best ways we have found out to help read the nervous system and notice that it's resetting is for someone to think about something that gives them great joy, calm. It really is something they go to that is of great pleasure. That when they notice and they think about that, that then they can notice what's happening on the inside. And I see this happening all the time. People start to think about that thing that gives them great joy, that pet, that music, whatever. And they will start to notice, and we invite people to notice. We never direct. We invite them to notice. Just notice how you're sensing on the inside, or the smile, or just some sense of relaxation in the neck or whatever. And again, that's very individualized. Something we also do with the resources is we intensify them. So I'm going to give you an example of this. So to intensify a resource, let's say my resource might be hiking. So the way I would intensify that resource, and again, it could be anything, but it's the model that we would follow, is to think more about the resource. So what is it I like about the resource? And what are the experiences with the resource? So if I'm hiking, what are the sights, the sounds, the smells? Can I smell those things now? Can I smell the wet soil? Can I see the leaves moving, the flowers? Can I sense myself walking this trail that I love so much? All those senses, so to just embody them and sense them. And as one senses those things, then to also notice what will be happening on the inside with breathing, muscle relaxation, etc. One of the things I love about resourcing, it's one of my favorite skills, is that you can take it with you anywhere. It's available regardless of what you're doing. I use my resource skills when I'm driving in the heavy traffic at the end and the beginning of the day. It just gives me calm to slow down and not worry about all the other chaos around me. So they're always available to you. You don't have to actually be doing them to have that tie between the cognitive and the physical resetting of the nervous system. So, something else about resources that relates also to crisis. We talked about this a moment ago during the questions. So, there are questions that we can ask people that will help them in the moment of a crisis, that support them. We don't have people stop grieving or stop whatever they may be experiencing, but we can direct them in a new way, even if they want to tell the story. So, as I said before, we avoid retelling the story or forcing people to retell the story, because that may not be comfortable at all. In fact, as I said, that can reset the memory deeper and in a way that might not be easily resolved. But we ask people to go to the end of the story. When did you know you would be okay? What was it like when help arrived? What helped you the most during that situation? What's helping you the most now? And be able to then have them sense that. As people experience that and don't push themselves back through a whole story, they have a whole different physiological response. Knowing they're okay right now helps them to sense that they're okay. So the last skill I'm going to talk about briefly is something called grounding. As people think back on big things that have happened, oftentimes we talk about it spacing out or disassociating. But it can be very, very uncomfortable to be taken back through memories. In fact, many times people don't feel safe when they go back into those very frightening memories that may have occurred. So grounding, and again, other words can be used, but what it really means is to have direct contact of the body or some part of the body with something that provides support in that moment. So if somebody is having a memory of something bad that happened, and you can see that they start to look like they're kind of like looking back into their heads. You can see people start to kind of glass up and they look back, which can be very unsafe depending on what they're doing, like driving. That's not good. So I could ground myself. We teach people to ground themselves, or we can support people in grounding themselves as someone who's with them. So helping them to just be aware of the solid surfaces that they have contact with. And this can be done by backing up against a wall and sensing the firm support that the wall gives you, sitting in a chair, taking a walk with them, can be laying flat on a sofa, outside. Grounding can be done in lots of different ways. But the most important thing is to, if you are helping someone ground or you're grounding yourself, is to just recognize that you are here now. You're not back there where the bad thing happened, whatever the bad thing is. You're here now, and you're safe. It's over. You're here. And so that's what we do with grounding. It brings people to the present moment instead of back into what took place. And so I want to talk briefly about self-help plans. And again, I apologize for not going deeper into some of these things, but I do want you to think about your own self-help plan. We all have things that happen to us, as has been said several times. So where would you be in terms of a resilient zone with regard to something that has happened, or even right now? And there's lots of types of stress. Some stress is healthy, not all stress is. But if it becomes toxic and we don't understand our own reactions, there's a possibility we need to think more about our self-help and our self-care plan. So what could you do that would be different to help you embark on a self-care plan that could improve how you're sensing things, your own well-being? And I just invite you to write a statement of encouragement to yourself, something that can strengthen your resolve to focus more on yourself and your own self-care. And if you were interested in the CRIM skills, then I invite you to consider downloading the app, listening to those skills, and thinking about how those could be incorporated in your daily routine.
Well, thank you, Dr. Buckles, again for the second half. We have a question here, and I want to get right to it. Is how would someone use the skill of resourcing if the traumatic event includes the loss of a loved one?
So, which would be grieving. So we never stop someone and tell them not to grieve, because grieving is natural, it's important, and we need to do that. Something very big has happened when we've lost someone close to us. But one of the things that's also amazing about the way we're made, and the humans are the only species that can do this, but we can hold two emotions at the same time. So oftentimes in grieving, it's typical is that people feel the weight of the loss, and they will start talking about that weight in various ways. But also naturally at that same time, which then we would emphasize and call it resourcing. What else about that individual? What do you remember about that person? What did they like to do? Their laughter. Now, that might bring an emotional response. It might bring tears, but that's okay. Tears are also a gift of God. They help us to release some of the emotion that is otherwise staying inside. But as what we would tell individuals, if it starts to get too heavy, just notice that you can hold the joy of having had that person in your life at the same time. So whenever this starts to weigh, lift the other one up and see what happens. And it won't be perfect, because grief has that back and forth. But the more you hold up the joy, the more it becomes available to you when this starts to weigh.
Great. We have another question here that's really good. How do I assist or help my friend who was told that she needs to pray more or / harder?
Well, I don't know all the issues of that situation, but wow, that's a delicate question. One of the things that I like about the skills that I've mentioned is that if our nervous system is dysregulated, there's not a lot we're going to do unless it works for us. So if prayer is what helps her the most, then she should know that. God gives us lots of things that are gifts that bring joy to our lives, and I don't think that they go against the idea of praying. But to know what makes her nervous system calm, it may be music, it may be a spiritual song, it may be something else. Focusing on moving her nervous system to resilience is going to help her more than anything. This is not about being spiritual enough. It's not about being good enough or bad if you don't pray. This is biology. Our biology can work against us. And the resiliency skills, we have seen a lot, we've done a lot of research. We know that it is the quickest way to reset and to help people move away from anxiety and depression and away from the symptoms associated with PTSD.
Okay. Now, would it be fair to say that our biology takes over, but the exciting news is there are many things that we can do to get it back?
Right. And the biology taking over can be a natural response. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that I'm broken. It means that it's my normal biology. And for whatever the reasons are, I may need support, and we all need it, frankly. I use these skills all the time, as do my colleagues, and we joke about even, we call it crimming ourselves. We're like, we can crim each other. Do you need me to help you through this? And so it's available, and just hoping people would sense that if they reset the nervous system, it's one of the organs we never talk about. If they would reset the nervous system, what would they experience in wellness? It's not just do it like a Nike commercial. This is something that is biological, and we have to practice it. It's like any muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it gets, and the more available it is to you when you need it.
That's great. And one of the things that we like to talk about and emphasize is that a lot of people, when they think about wellness, they think about exercise or eating the right things. This is just as much of an importance to do this. And and we could probably say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that these are skills we can do every day, whether you're in a crisis or not.
Right. I mean, it's amazing if people would just take a moment, and I have to remind myself to do it too, just take a moment to put myself in the best place. Before I have a hard conversation with someone, put myself in the best place. It changes how my brain is functioning, and we know that. I can be better at decision making if I put my nervous system in its best place.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for being here. And thank you so much for joining us for this month's Wellness Live. I want to also invite you to next month's Wellness Live, which will be on September 25, same time at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. And we have an excellent guest for you. His name is Dr. D.P. Harris, and he is going to talk about having real relationships in this virtual world that we're in. See you next time.